Hey everybody, super pumped to be here. I'm Jacob. For those who don't know me, I am here work here at Motherduck in Devrel. Um, yeah, we're really excited to talk about what it looks like to build end-to-end pipelines with AI, and of course we have Hugo here from Orchestra as well. Hugo, you want to say hi to our friends?
Yes, hello everybody. Very excited. London is calling, so good to be here and looking
Yeah.
forward to this.
Amazing. All right, so we're gonna I'll just go through a little bit of a kind of walkthrough around to give everybody context for what Motherduck is and then I'll hand it off to Hugo to talk a little bit about what Orchestra is. And then of course, um, we will do a demo, which is the whole awesome part of this thing, right? So let's just hop in here. Yep, this is the agenda, what we're up to. Yeah, let's hop into it. Uh, I think one thing that we're seeing at Motherduck, which has been really interesting in the last, let's say, 6 months, specifically since we've seen Opus 4.5 drop in November, the way that we use data is changing. Um, it has gotten a lot easier. As it turns out, AI is tremendously good at writing SQL and interacting with data, and in fact, taking things that are semi-structured and structuring them. And all the things that were really hard suddenly just became easier for us to do. Um, and that has led us into some really interesting kind of ideas and notions on the Motherduck side. So Motherduck is a cloud data warehouse. Um, and what we're really thinking about lately is what does it mean to be the infrastructure for answers? So once you have a data warehouse that like kind of fits in really nicely with your AI chat that you prefer, whether it's ChatGPT or um, Claude, or maybe even you're an open Chinese model enjoyer with DeepSeek or GLM or whatever, um, we're thinking differently about how all these pieces fit together. And of course, you know, as much as things are moving quickly as it relates to uh, the new world, all of the things that still existed kind of in the pre-AI era still exist, right? Which is, hey, things are expensive, they're slow, it's really complex to manage. What does it look like to build something in the era of AI? And that's further complicated by, I think this slide is a great example, which is once you start tying in AI to your warehouse, they kind of query a little bit differently than humans do, right? They are not running a few queries kind of in a single session to find an answer. They are running tons of queries, a bunch of small ones, just trying to explore the data, understand what's in there. And they don't really have memory like we do. Even and there's been a lot of ink spilled about this notion of memory. And it doesn't work yet, maybe in the future. But what that means is every time that it looks at your database, it has to do a bunch of work to figure out what the heck's going on and understand what's in there, and relearn it every time. And so they do all of these queries. It's a lot of high frequency bursty queries. And they don't know all the traps that your humans do about the data. So um, that brings us to DuckDB, which is a query engine that is very fortuitously built kind of for this pattern. I don't think we would take credit for saying, hey, like we built an engine that anticipated what the AI landscape would look like in 2026, but I'm very happy to say that DuckDB fits very nicely in that. And DuckDB is the compute engine that Motherduck uses to run on top of your data. And so I'll just talk about a few of the details here. Broadly, there's a bunch of different layers, but it takes SQL, does a bunch of magic to it, makes it run on your CPU kind of massively in parallel, which means it's really fast. We call that vectorization. Um, but there's a whole bunch of things to make that all work. And of course, Motherduck takes all of that really good stuff that DuckDB is building, which is single node and local, and puts it in the cloud and scales it out. And like when we say scales it out and that it works, what does this mean? Here's a chart with cost on the Y and speed on the X. And you'll see, of course, in the top right, there is Motherduck, and you can compare it quite nicely to Redshift and Snowflake, for example. around what it looks like for speed and price compared to, you know, what do the legacy warehouses look like. And this is great because if you take the same query pattern that you're running in Motherduck and run it on Snowflake, you're going to spend 10 times as much. And so when you want to obviously use AI as much as you can to make this all work, it's really good at doing this type of work so that you can actually do the hard work that requires a human. And so we believe Motherduck is nicely positioned for that in the future. So let's hand it over to Hugo. You want to talk a little bit about Orchestra, Hugo?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive in. So yeah, I think we also probably can't take credit for anticipating the wave of how everything had to be, you know, controlled as code, especially for agents, but it's sort of nonetheless like great practice. So at its core, like Orchestra is an orchestration engine, super easy to use. Under the hood, everything is declarative. We have our own dialect, but really what I describe it as is a single pane of glass. So it's not just a platform that's capable of like orchestrating all of your workflows, but we can help you with the monitoring, the metadata, the alerting, and obviously having all of that metadata and lineage is one, you know, it's fantastic because then you can surface that to agents as well. I guess one thing Motherduck and Orchestra have in common is just like the massive parallelization and a very like serverless nature. So, you know, it's not like you have to run Orchestra on a node and then sometimes stuff gets too big and then everything falls over. Everything is serverless. It just runs. So yeah, like a big thing we fight against is obviously, you know, folks building stuff in Airflow. The value proposition I normally say is, well, look, if you're a, you know, large organization and you want to have multiple environments for multiple teams, what you have to do is deploy multiple Airflow instances, like have Kubernetes, deploy all of that. And then even then, to get your context layer, which is obviously a hot topic at the moment, you're then hooking up observability tools, catalogs, you're standing them up separately, like you're editing your Airflow code to make it even more complex, pushing all of that data into the context layer. And then on top of that, the question becomes like, oh, well, how do I even serve that to people? How do I run agents? It's yet more infrastructure. So what Orchestra is, it's like a unified autonomous architecture you can use to just massively reduce tool sprawl. Next slide. So yeah, these are the high level numbers. There's some big numbers. You have to see it to believe it, but we will see it. We will see it today. So we can crack on. And yeah, we got a ton of awesome customers, ton of awesome partners. You can actually see the little octopus in the back. Cool. Demo time.
All right, let's do it. Why don't you pull your screen up and I will throw it up on the screen here.
Sounds good. But yeah, I had a lot of fun demoing this, and hopefully you all will too.
Okay, let me pull this up. There we go. Thank you, Gerald, for pulling that down. Okay.
All right, sounds good. So just before we start, I'm gonna kick off this skill that I've built, and then I'm gonna talk through it. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to show us how we can use AI, Motherduck, and Orchestra to build an end-to-end data engineering pipeline, but completely from scratch. And I'm going to say like it's a little bit different to some of the other demos where you might see Claude just like generate some Python and then it moves some data and then, you know, like it's just there. This is designed to be a bit more of like a production ready flow. So I'm going to talk us through that. So the first part is obviously defining the skill, which we have here. I'm not going to go into it in the actual skill, but I'll talk through it. So first component is staging database. We're not going to be taking data and just like landing it in like in our prod database. We're going to have a staging database. And this is really important in the context of agents, because if you don't have that sort of like sandboxed environment, then agents can kind of do anything, and that's obviously bad. Second part of the skill is essentially to tell Claude to generate a couple of extra files. So the first file is obviously the like Python code or whatever code you're going to use to actually move the data. But then the second thing is going to be deploying that Python code and deploying this full end-to-end pipeline in an environment that can execute it. So in our case, that's going to be like our sort of pipeline.yaml, which is how Orchestra is defined. The other thing is we're going to set up a little branch. So down here, you can see I've got like my feature branch. It's pretty small, but it is there. And then, yeah, so in this case, maybe taking a step back, all I asked AI to do is I've asked it to get the linear cycles data using Orchestra and the DLT skill. So linear is a little bit like a issue tracking software. You know, that's what we use. And I've just asked it to go ahead and get that cycles data because I want to kind of see how we're doing. So that is what Claude has done. And if I take a look on the left, we can see some stuff is happening, but it looks like we've already kicked off the job. So if I head over to Orchestra, we'll see that this pipeline is running. So I can go ahead and take a look at that. And it's pretty cool. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to run the Python code that's going to land data in the staging DB. And then we're going to snapshot it, and then we're going to move it to staging. So I guess if we just have a quick look at exactly what has happened, AI has generated 2 sets of files. So the first set of files is the Python code that's moving data. We're actually using
can you
DLT.
zoom in a little bit? Can you zoom in a
Yes,
little bit on your?
I can. I will zoom in. Yeah, all good, all
okay,
good.
Amazing.
So I've created, or Claude has created, some Python with DLT that is, you know, it's like a pretty standard data ingestion script. We've got some fields, we've got a source. You know, I'm not an expert here, but it works. And it's also been clever. So it's added things like parameters that we can use. So, you know, the number of days for the data we need to get, like the name of the staging database, the name of the data set. And that's all running in very nicely. But then the question becomes like, okay, well, how am I actually going to run this, right? What am I going to do in it? And that is the Orchestra pipeline. So where like running all of this Python code in like an Airflow might take you, you know, hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. In this case, it's actually just like a few lines of YAML. And again, you can kind of see some of these inputs that we've put in here. So that's what AI has generated, and now Orchestra is running it. So if I head over to our pipeline, we can see that, well, the one I had earlier and the latest one have both completed, which is pretty great. And I just want to talk very quickly about what these Motherduck functions are doing. So before we head to Motherduck, you can see that all of the data ingestion has happened. You can see that everything has been parameterized, which is pretty neat. And then we've done 2 things in Motherduck. So the first thing is to create this thing called a snapshot, and it's pretty cool. Like Jacob, hop in if I don't say this right, but a snapshot is basically like you know, like a historical cross section of some data. They're immutable, but it allows you to essentially copy data from that snapshot into another table. And then that second step is essentially when you're taking the data that you've just loaded and putting it into prod. So that second step uses this functionality, which is copying data from the snapshot into the prod DB. And you'll see that because we've got this lovely lineage in Orchestra, we're only going to actually promote staging to production after all that data's come in.
Yep, that's right.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'll just call out just like quickly, you know, one thing we're thinking about is because, you know, we do have, or I guess like, because we have this notion of like differential storage, which you maybe heard of as like MVCC and other databases, but we kind of think about it a little bit more holistically. You know, we want you to be able to kind of handle these pieces, and you do that with agents because, or as you do that with agents, you have the right abstractions so that you can do this in a safe way, which I think is like kind of the underlying piece here, which is you can build a nice workflow that lets you safely kind of send an agent to it and then run your tests, and if they pass, you can promote it to prod. I'll fix my volume, thank you.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, this is a really nice flow. Obviously, because we now have this as a sort of like its own branch. If you wanted to sort of split this up and sort of run this in staging, and then create your PR and then merge it, and then sort of like run the snapshotting as like a result of you merging the code, you could do that as well. But it's really easy. And now I'm just going to head over to Motherduck and show you what everything looks like. So I'm going to take a little look at the Motherduck information schema.query history table. You can see that we have done all those things that I said we would do. So we've created a snapshot, like we've copied it in. You can use this to kind of like take a look at the snapshots. And then if I have a look at, just maximize this, if I have a look at the actual DBs we've got, so again, you can see here we've got our staging database, and then here we have our production database, which is essentially just like, we're just cloning data from staging, which is almost like a working branch, and pushing it in. And Jacob, I remember seeing that like with snapshots, they all happen on the database level. Is that right?
Yeah, the granularity of snapshots is indeed at the level of database. And so like one thing that's different about Motherduck is that you will typically have many databases, like maybe like a database by source or by purpose. Whereas, I don't know, in something like Snowflake, you might have like, dev, test, and prod. Motherduck, you will have potentially, 10 or 100 or 1,000 databases, just depending on how you want to do that. And that's just because of differences in how we think about what a database is and what it's for, compared to a traditional kind of client server model that you would see in I don't know, Postgres. So it's a little bit different there. I think like I saw a question that was relevant here. Let me just throw this in here. Why did you need to snapshot? Interesting. My mic is still low. Okay, let me see if I can fix this problem.
You want me to take it?
Sure, go ahead, take it.
So like if you don't snapshot, then what you're going to do is you're going to take this database and you'll need to copy it into this database. And that means you're not doing a zero copy clone, which means it's going to be slow and expensive. I think that's the short answer, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll get really close to my mic. Everyone can hear it. Yes, that's right. You don't have to do this, of course, right? Like you can do this in much more traditional ways, but like we're thinking about unattended workflows that are also safe, right? So how do you let your agent do something in a way that is reversible? And so by using a snapshot, we can always fail back to it, right? And I think that's a critical piece. I suspect that as we go along here with better and better AI models, that we will be looking at our code less and less, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so that's basically the flow. I added one extra thing here. So in Motherduck, they have this pretty cool feature called dives, and a dive is just a set of like TSX files. So it's essentially like BI as code. But it's pretty cool because it means that as as you're basically building out all of your like data pipelines, if you need to have things like dynamic content, like agents are very, very good at taking some of that dynamic content and just putting it in. So, this is an example. It's pretty dense, pretty boring. But just now, I asked the agent to update this dive that I created for our linear data, which I've moved in. And again, like I've not made this dashboard, like I've not learned TSX. You know, the AI has done it for me. But you can see we've got a couple of nice bits. So we've got the last updated app, which is showing us, you know, 20 past 3 UCC. So if anybody is a, you know, skeptical stakeholder and they come into this dashboard and they want to see when it was updated, they kind of have the answer. But we've also got this little thing to the orchestra run. So that is going to take us right back to the lineage. So if you've got slightly more technical stakeholders that want to see exactly what's happened and when, they've got all that information too.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what we got.
Amazing, amazing. We got some good questions here, so I'm going to pull a few up here. First one is, let's start with, well, let's just start at the top here. Let's go here from Nico. I think this is kind of, we didn't really talk about this in the demo, but I think is relevant to what you're thinking about with Orchestra here. How are you thinking about tying it into semantic and modeling layer tools?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, we could obviously make the agent not just write Python that lands data, right? We could make it do more things. So maybe if you're landing data in S3 and then you need to load it somewhere, run like a query task. If you wanted the agent to like generate some basic DBT modeling that's like, you know, renaming columns or unpacking JSONs, you can do all of that. So in that orchestra pipeline, you know, if you wanted to have like another section, which is just, I'm going to present again. If you wanted to have another section that's running your DBT, that would be super easy. So here, for example,
let me throw your screen back up.
Cheers, mate. You know, here we're sort of creating that snapshot. We're promoting it to prod. You know, maybe before that, you've got some like DBT modeling. And again, because everything in Orchestra is code, it's super easy. There you go.
And what you just showed, that interface you just showed, like that is the same interface, or not the same interface, but the the skills that you've built out for Orchestra also can edit those files and make new ones, right?
Exactly. So this is all like controlled in Git. So you see it's all code. It's all bidirectional. So if you then like do it from the UI, you can go to GitHub, which has an extremely slow API these days because of agents. But again, like you can, yeah, I know, right? But yeah, we got it in both places, which is pretty cool.
Okay, very cool. Sorry, so like not only do you have, you know, a nice UI that is easy for human to use, you know, the abstractions exist for you to kind of say, hey, Claude, like go add this thing or fix it. Okay, really cool.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and like, you know, like Motherduck, we have like a CLI. So if you start like from scratch somewhere in code, you can do a CLI command that registers a pipeline in Orchestra 2. So that's why you see we've got these little things like aliases. But,
yeah, really cool, really cool. All right, let's see. Next question here. Okay. From Rahan, how many agents are you using? How easy, complex was this setup?
This is Claude with one skill.
So, okay. So like, that sounds easy. Can you give us a little more detail, Hugo?
Yeah. So running Claude Code locally, we have built a skill, or like I built a skill for this demo that's generating some of that code. That lives in your like .claude skills folder. Trying to think if there's anything else that's like a bit of a pain. Honestly, like it was pretty easy. One of the things I didn't talk about was like how you need to set up like your tokens. So in this case, because we're pulling data from Linear and landing it in Motherduck and doing stuff with Orchestra, there would be at least 3 sets of credentials, right? Like you need credentials to go to your source database. You need credentials to like land stuff in Motherduck. And then you also need the Orchestra credential to like interact with our API. So yeah, setting that up is probably a non-trivial part.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the point is like once you have the kind of tool endpoints configured for our security access, the prompting is fairly trivial, I think, right?
Well, the great thing was, right, like I haven't had to write any Motherduck skills because I just used the Motherduck MCP. And I noticed that when Claude didn't know what to do, like it can go to the MCP and use the docs, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think with Orchestra, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what do you do with Orchestra? You like create pipelines, you run pipelines, you debug pipelines. It's like a nice layer of abstraction.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, another question here from Claudio. I guess question for both services. How do you handle PII data? Is it self-hosted, custom cloud setup, and
You
option?
wanna take this first?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Motherduck is, we are fully DuckDB compliant, so we do see some customers running some portions of their pipelines kind of in their own cloud and then serving like data that's been stripped from a PII perspective into kind of Motherduck for serving to their end applications. We do also have, we're also in the EU region, in EU Central one, I think, which is Frankfurt, for AWS, for example. So if you do have like questions about or concerns about like where the data is domiciled, you can always set up a European region. But in general, we see people are processing it before if they really, really care about it. From like a Motherduck perspective, we do have quite a few like healthcare clients here in the US, and so we have very tight security controls around where that data is used and how it's used by us and how we secure it. So um, I think it just depends on what your internal compliance policies are, but no, there's not a like, hey, you can drag and drop Motherduck into your VPC as of yet, at least. The future, who knows what the future holds? Yeah.
Drag
Hugo,
and
why don't
drop
you?
it onto your massive nodes.
Yeah, yeah. Hugo, you want
Yeah.
to take what about Orchestra?
Yeah. So I guess the big difference between like an orchestra and like a older orchestration tool, like an Airflow, would be that we don't really like want to process or store any of your data. So Orchestra is all cloud hosted. We basically push queries down to databases. Like we trigger things that move data. Obviously, in the demo, like I moved some data, I processed some data, and in that case, we just like have hybrid options. So running all of the compute in your own infrastructure. Um,
Yeah, great question.
but yeah, great question.
Okay, so let's drop that one. Next one. Okay. Let's see. Dan has a question. Actually, hang on. Oh, we'll take this one first. Do full database snapshots create storage cost overhead? Um, so the answer is it depends on how long you keep your snapshots around. By default, Motherduck storage can keeps like 7 days of snapshots in our storage. Um, and so if those are if you're keeping them around for less than 7 days, they're kind of just like free as part of what you get. Um, you can we also have what we call transient databases, which don't include, or I think only include 1 day of snapshotting or maybe 0 days. And so in that case, you would have some incremental cost. But because everything in Motherduck is kind of incremental, generally, as long as you're building your data sets incrementally, it's fairly low overhead to use the snapshotting functionality. But again, like I think that designing here's what I would say. If you design your database to be incremental, it's very cheap to use this type of functionality. If you don't design it to be incremental, maybe you're using like full replace in like really big DBT jobs all the time, which we do see customers do, and they say, "Oh, that's kind of expensive to run." Um, you do need to kind of think about it a little bit differently because we do keep all those diffs around. And again, there are like controls you can and levers you can pull to make it behave a little bit differently, but the default is 7 days. Okay, we have something in here too, from Peter. It was hard to see. Could you provide a link to the orchestra and linear? Peter, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're trying to get at here, but I'm pulling it up. Just, Hugo, if you want to just like, I guess like, oh, I think he's talking about like what the GitHub, like you had a pipeline, right, defined for orchestra and linear. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Just want to show that real quick and walk through it.
Yeah.
Let me share this for you. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So this is like a visual representation of the pipeline.
Hmm.
So the first task is running Python. Can show like a definition of it. And essentially it's, like this is a form, but under the hood, it's declarative. So what we're doing is we're calling this script, which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
it's called like linear cycles pipeline, but that tracks to this script down here.
Okay, got it. So basically it's building the script using the DLT library, and then DLT has a connector for linear, and so it's fairly trivial to kind of like tie in the keys and just run
Well,
it.
I actually don't think it did have a connector for linear. I actually
Oh,
think it just created it using the like
that's even cooler.
scaffolding. Yeah, because I asked this on the Slack ages ago, and they were like, no, it doesn't exist. And I was like, okay, well, it does now. But it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
So
okay, really
yeah,
cool.
that's the first bit, Peter, and then the second bit is leveraging like one of Orchestra's tasks. So we have different tasks that wrap logic, like authentication, triggering stuff, polling stuff, error handling, and obviously we have a Motherduck task. We support running, state-aware orchestration with DBT on Motherduck too. So Jacob, like you were saying, might be a good way to save some costs and all those incrementals.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
but yeah, this is just running like a snapshot command,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of like see that in the thing here.
Okay, cool. Okay, love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. I'm gonna pull that question down. Question here from Usual. What's in the skill MD? Is it just instructions or a bundle of helper scripts, schema references?
Great question, Uj. It was quite long. I got Claude to do it. I edited it a bit. Like I found it pretty long, to be perfectly honest. This is what's in it, by the way. So I literally gave it very, very, very like detailed step-by-step instructions on how I wanted the flow to go and why. But it
Yeah,
didn't take long to generate. But I did think it was quite long.
I think I do think that like there's a little bit of skill to generating the skills, right? Like how do you it does take a little bit of iteration, but like I don't know. Um uh yeah, I see there's a comment from Ryan here down in the chat here, which is basically like the I'm not sure what's in there, but like it works for Claude, right? I think like in general how I'm thinking
Yeah.
about skills is like I'm generally not reading them. They're for Claude and I'm testing them to make sure that they work. Um that
Do
may
you ever
not
find yourself like going in them and making them more concise?
sometimes. I think like in general, where I'm finding myself with AI generated text just broadly is like if it's for consumption by other AI, I'm not looking at it too closely. I'm kind of just like, okay, like I know this works. I'm gonna send it to someone. They're gonna give it to their Claude. But if I know that there's a human that's going to read it, I'm like copy editing the crap out of it. Like
Mm,
I think like to some extent like uh for me, it's like I want to respect my audience, right? And be like, hey, like if I'm not just gonna drop slop on you, but like for AI, I'm like, you know what, Claude, you can deal with other Claude slop. It's very funny. But I don't find myself generally refining them too much. That being said, for some things, you showed this briefly. Actually, there was a Mother Duck dive in your demo. Um, as part of that, there's a skill in the Mother Duck. I'll take this off real quick. There's a skill in the Motherduck MCP to uh to get the dive guide. That dive guide, or sorry, there's a tool. Let me use the right words. There's a tool in the Motherduck MCP called Get Dive Guide, and that is a skill. And we do really care about that being concise enough. And I think the main reason is two things. A, if you're serving the skill all the time, you want to kind of think about token usage a little bit. You're not like thinking about it maybe as a first priority, but certainly a second priority. And the second thing is you're running evals on it, right? So like as we change these small changes to text, is it improving the ability of Claude to build this object? Right. So what Hugo's showing here is actually a bit of React and SQL that you can build with the Motherduck MCP and Claude. I'm sure that actually you probably could put this skill right into an orchestra pipeline and just like at the end of it build a dive, right? Which would be really cool. But anyways, this is just a feature we have in Motherduck that lets you build these really cool kind of BI visualizations. But it's a good question, I think, around how we think about it. I think there's a related question. Any estimation for the process consumed token usage? Like how
Mm.
I think the real question here is like, hey, great, you guys are building all these tools. Are you thinking about and measuring? I'll give this question to you first, and then I'll answer it. Are you thinking about and measuring like how how efficient your tooling is and your software is at Orchestra for AIs to use?
Setting me up.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think definitely, right? I think this process took about 10,000 tokens, so not a whole lot, but equally the output is basically just executing code and doing Git commands and doing some bash.
Hmm.
So I that like that's why I'm sort of like a little bit unhappy with the skill itself, because it's just like it's way too verbose. Like if I wrote it myself, it would just be a list of like commands and
Yeah,
steps,
it'd probably be
you
like
know?
20 lines. Yeah, it'd probably be 20
Yeah,
lines of
yeah,
code or something. Yeah, yeah.
right. And then inevitably, right? Like the agent would be faster. But you know how it is in AI demo world. Um,
Hmm.
do these
Totally.
things last minute.
Yeah, yeah,
What do you think, Jacob?
yeah, I mean, so it's a great question. I will just talk about, as we're thinking about, the main way that Motherduck interfaces with AI agents today is via our MCP server, our remote MCP server. And so we think carefully over every single word that's in those tool descriptions. Like, A, we want them to describe and the tool correctly so that it's used, but we don't want to have any extra words in there. And I think like that is a conscious decision, right? You can overload those, you can not be as thoughtful about them, but we are very thoughtful about what goes in there because ultimately, uh, I suspect, as we showed in that slide previously, like your agents are going to be running tons of queries, which means they're going to be running tons of tool calls. And so if we're not careful, we can easily just like bloat the crap out of our context, which costs us money, right? Every time we retrieve it, it costs us money, even on cash tokens. So that's I think a really good or like how we're thinking about it right now. I will say that like on the dives portion that we were just showing, which lets you build BI, that's quite verbose from a perspective of using Claude and tokens, just because it's raw React. And for anyone who's used it, I think the way that you can make this tighter is you use libraries, right? So you use libraries and you use kind of pre-baked components, and I think like that's definitely on the pathway for what we'll build at Motherduck is like more components, more libraries that make it just easier for AI to use it, and that means that it's writing less code and therefore consuming less tokens and more efficient, right? And so you just kind of got to know where it is. Um,
Mm. Did
yeah.
you all ever consider a declarative scaffolding for your BI as code? Or?
Uh, I think, I think this is such a good question, actually. I think we will probably back into it. Uh, The initial kind of genesis of it was more like we were noticing people were just like using our MCP to build visuals with skills and then sharing them with each other. You like by slacking skills to each other, basically, internally. And we were like, okay, we should just like make this a little more prescriptive. And I think
Mm.
in some ways we think about it as like being totally off the rails as a benefit. But the downside of that obviously is that it is more expensive to run because you can build anything in it, and you may have to repeat yourself to build a specific component. If you want to
Mm.
reuse it between dives, for example, that can be difficult. But anyways,
Interesting.
all right, Paul brought up something. We'll be a little bit less self-indulgent. We'll take two more questions, by the way. You edited a pipeline generated by the agent in your demo, Hugo. Did you update the skill MD to include what you inserted yourself?
I didn't know, so you would have to do that. You would have to do that yourself.
Yeah.
Or
Okay,
you could
good.
just like go into Claude and be like, "Can you update the pipeline?" And then it would probably be like, "Do you want me to update the skill?"
Yeah, right, exactly. Do you
Press
think
tab.
about this is a related question to this. Do you think about source controlling your skills when you're building like an orchestra pipeline?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for us, like, we're slightly more early days, like on the skills.
Hmm.
But yeah, absolutely. Like source control the skills, have versions of them, put evals on top. Um, it's just like when you're actually, building a pipeline that is deploying data and moving data, there are just so
Hmm.
many moving parts, right? It's like, am I judging it on speed? Am I judging it on token usage? Am I judging it on whether or not the data actually gets to prod? Am I,
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
judging it on like the quality of the ingestion script that I just made? Like, it's there's a lot there, in my opinion.
That totally makes sense. I think like one thing I've noticed is like as I'm getting more into like agentic workflows is that I'm explicitly building my README for humans, and I'm
Yeah.
building my Claude MD file for my agent, right? Or an agent's MD file. Like that's one
Oh,
thing
makes
that
sense.
I've changed in my workflow. It's like, okay, the README is going to be super tight. It's designed for humans. The Claude MD will be like, much more verbose and will kind of be more comprehensive, but at the trade-off of like not being really interpretable by humans.
Mm,
Um,
awesome.
yeah. All right. I don't think we have any other questions coming in here. We really appreciate everybody's time. Um, Hugo, thank you so much for the really awesome demo. That was smooth, man. That was smooth.
Well, look, I've always wanted to do a demo with the Jacob Matson, so lifetime achievement goal complete.
We'll send you a trophy.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody. We'll be wrapping up here. We will be sending out links, etc. So you can see it if you were able to if you missed part of it, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks everybody.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye.